Hello and welcome to Cloud Native Live, the CNCF Annual Cloud Native Survey. This session, we're joined by an esteemed panel who are going to dive into the key findings from the report and share their insight on where the cloud native ecosystem is headed. My name's... Bear with me one moment. There we go. Apologies about that. My name's Eliza and I'm from the CNCF marketing team, and I'm going to be in the chat awaiting all of your questions. We have a Q&A session right at the end of the panel chat, so we want you to share any of your questions that you have directly in the chat and I will share them with the panel. But before we hand over to the panel, I've just got a little bit of housekeeping. Hilary, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Thank you very much. I just want to remind everybody that CNCF events bring together folks from all across the industry, including our competitors. So we ask everyone to please stick to the agenda and avoid discussions in the chat that could raise antitrust or competition concerns. And if you're curious about any of the specifics, the Linux Foundation antitrust policy is available on their website. Next slide, please, Hilary. And also, the Linux Foundation is committed to providing a safe, welcoming, and professional environment for everyone. Please treat each other with respect and follow our code of conduct. Any harassment or inappropriate behavior isn't tolerated. And if you experience or witness anything concerning, please let me know in the chat. And with that out of the way, we'll get started. So I'd like to hand you over to Hilary Carter. She is the SVP of Research at the Linux Foundation to tell you more about the CNCF Annual Cloud Native Survey.
Thank you so much, Eliza. Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's my pleasure as SVP of Research to share some of the key findings from the work that we've done this year with CNCF, and also to have the perspectives from our expert panelists and terrific collaborators. You'll be hearing from Jan-Erik Aase, partner and global head ISG provider Lens and ISG, who's going to give a deep dive analyst perspective on our report's findings, as well as Jeffrey Sica, known by many of us in the CNCF community as Jeffy, head of projects at CNCF. Jeffy was a close collaborator on the design and analysis of the CNCF annual report, as somebody with whom we had regular meetings and consultative input to make sure that this year's report was a success. And I'm so pleased that he's here with us today. So let's get in to the high level about why we do this work. Linux Foundation Research has been working with the CNCF to run their annual study. We've done this for a number of years now. And it's really important to have empirical data and data that provides trust and a long longitudinal view of cloud native adoption, looking at year-over-year trends. We want to understand the real production usage levels, not just aspirational plans. So being able to measure trends empirically through the research process, through empirical studies, is really important. Through this process, we're able to surface practitioner realities, hearing from expert practitioners in cloud native in order to make sure that we have results from the people who are doing the work out there in the community. And the fun part is that we co-create this with so many folks from the CNCF community, and then return the results and the insights back and in an open capacity to the community through a report that's published under Creative Commons license. And we encourage all of you to read the report, socialize the findings internally, and use this data to your organization's advantage and to the advantage of the individual project that you're engaging with. So here's how we went about conducting this year's study. We run a worldwide web-based survey that we fielded in September of last year. We run this survey year over year as a means to track meaningful change. We make modifications to adjust for changing themes, to incorporate new trends and practices and new projects. And this allows us to have a very current view of the cloud native landscape. We're able to identify trends, and we're able to see some meaningful insights. We had a great respondent rate. We had 628 respondents from a cross-section of industries, regions, and organizational sizes. There were 65 questions in the study. It's not a short survey. So when we get a high response rate, as we have done for this study and past studies, it really speaks to the level of engagement across the CNCF community and beyond it. It's really exciting when people share what they know for the benefit of others, for the benefit of cloud native community strategy. And it was great to hear from such a range of different practitioners, people with different skill sets. And as we'll see, we'll dig into the demographics a little bit later, but at the level of expertise in the study is really impressive. Looking at geography, our worldwide sample was derived primarily from Europe, with 36% coming from the EU, topped up by 5% from the UK and non-EU European countries. Then we had a great turnout from the Americas, from United States, Canada, Mexico, Central and South America. And our Asia representation was largely coming in from a real pan-Asia community, pretty evenly split from India, Asia Pacific. And we'd love to get a bit more representation from China and Japan in future studies. It's really important that all voices are part of the research process. So if you see in future studies, got friends in Japan, friends in China, our surveys are available in simplified Chinese and the Japanese language. And we would love to hear from practitioners so that they can contribute their insights to future studies. So look, that's the demographic high-level view in terms of geography. Other demographic results, when it came to the role that our survey respondents play in the ecosystem, primarily we heard from software developers and engineers, followed by system admins, and then professional services and consultants. So that sort of dominated the top three type of role responding to the study. In terms of the size of organizations, we had a lot of folks responding from large companies, almost 50% from companies over 1,000 employees, but also a very interesting distribution, some good representation from smaller companies too. There are a lot of companies in the CNCF community that are at the startup level, and it's really important that we have this cross-section of views across organization sizes. Other demographic points, we have a highly qualified, highly experienced respondent. Folks with more than 10 years of experience represented 60% of the sample. We had a near even split in terms of end user organizations responding vis-a-vis vendor IT providers at 54%. And it's great to see that kind of response from the end user community. The levels of engagement across studies from end user organizations are really, really quite inspiring. The number of projects that are coming out of end user organizations are really exciting too. So that's a really healthy trend. And then in terms of the revenues, this is a great question. The percentage of revenues that our respondents are deriving from providing cloud native technologies, products, or services, it's a pretty even distribution between none and 81 to 100%. But the interesting point is the near one quarter, 24% of our respondents don't know the answer to that question. And for me, what I think is very interesting about this demographic information is that we can perhaps do a better job of integrating our survey respondent profiles, our software developers, into the holistic business objectives of an organization, so that these respondents have an understanding of their organization's revenue models and business models and the significance of their work within that. This is a finding that comes out time and time again around ROI and the need to connect revenues and returns from the type of work that we do and the significance of open source projects within that revenue equation and that return equation. So I think that's something that is a community or a cultural attribute that can be managed at the organizational level to bring in that sort of broad-based understanding about revenue and the significance of revenue in the software developers world. Digging into some key findings, kicking off with the fact that Kubernetes has really become the platform for generative AI, with 66% of respondent organizations using Kubernetes to host their generative AI workloads. So obviously AI is an important conversation among organizations, and how organizations are managing this AI mandate is very closely coupled with a cloud native infrastructure. When we look at the type of work that organizations are doing in terms of AI, we've learned that most organizations are AI model consumers and not model builders. The need to build a model from scratch is not as significant today. And in 2025, when we ran this study, good foundational models exist. The cost to create them from scratch is very expensive. And so that's reflected here, that just over half of the organizations surveyed, they're not building models, they're consumers of them. And what are they doing with those models? Well, deployment is very deliberate. They are actually, this is on the frequency of daily deployment. Deploying models on a daily basis is quite costly. It results from the fact that the data needs to be constantly verified and checked, and it's a resource-intensive process. So that's why we're getting this figure that organizations are deploying AI models. Most of them are doing so occasionally, very few doing so on a daily basis. 59% of organizations are using cloud native for much or nearly all of their development work. So thinking holistically beyond just AI, looking at their software development work. And that's up slightly over 2023, when that figure came in at 54%. We know that Kubernetes is the default in production environments, with 82% of container users deploying Kubernetes in production. That's a big jump over 2023, when that number came in at 66%. So that's a really exciting finding for the Kubernetes project and for the CNCF community. Looking specifically now at containers, they are shifting into production workloads, or continuing to do so. The usage in production applications has increased from 41% in 2023 to 56% in 2025. What we find is that cultural changes with development team is the number one challenge for deploying containers, and it's surpassing technical concerns. The need to be able to onboard organizations to a technology and then to manage those best practices is a challenge, and that's where platform engineering is so important to help manage the challenge for deployment and the need to continually support automation and best practices management. It's a cultural phenomenon that needs to be nurtured. When we look at infrastructure, the sustainability concerns are emerging largely from vibe coding and machine-driven automated usage. The fact of the matter of AI usage in software development is creating a new kind of thrash. It's creating bottlenecks, it's creating higher frequencies, a greater strain on maintainers. And so that's a challenge that the community needs to address. Looking now at high-level cloud-native adoption, the fact that the survey revealed it's reached 98% across surveyed organizations is significant. It's probably what you would describe as peak maturity, and where we are in the modernization of our industries. That you can't run an organization today if you don't have a cloud native capability. that's really exciting. It speaks to the level of maturity of the technology, the ubiquity of the technology, and its significance to a modern competitive organization. Looking a little bit deeper at how that adoption figure comes together, we were able to identify different maturity profiles within the study in terms of the level of adoption of cloud native within an organization, and came up with 4 unique profiles. The explorers are just beginning their journey. The adopters are starting development and deployment. Practitioners are doing a lot of development and deployment with cloud native, and the innovators are doing nearly all of their development and deployment using cloud native technologies. So let's dig into these profiles a little bit more. Looking at the explorers, the folks who are just getting started, organizational size is a factor here. The explorers are primarily dominated by large organizations, 45% as the single group, and 10% of explorers are deriving revenue from cloud native activity. Primarily explorers are coming out of Europe and the Americas, interestingly. In terms of adopters, a more even organizational size distribution, a quarter of adopter revenue is derived from cloud native. Looking at the practitioners, an increasing level of revenue derived, 35%. Fairly even distribution in terms of organizational size, and similar geographic dynamics for the practitioner group, a significant majority in Europe. And then the innovator group, Europe's dominating here. More than half of innovators have revenue derived from cloud native technologies, products, and services. And here, smaller companies are innovating significantly. They have this sort of innovator profile. It really speaks to the fact that they're more agile. They're perhaps more free to innovate with open source projects, compared to the fact that the explorers were more highly represented by large organizations. And then finally, a few more high-level findings before I turn it over to Jan-Erik. Looking at high maturity teams and how they're operating, it really is defined by the pace. 74% of cloud native innovators are checking in code multiple times a day, versus 35% of the explorers. So the pace, the checking in of code is a key indicator of organizational maturity and highly linked to revenue. GitOps practices also correlate strongly with cloud native maturity, and adoption jumps from 0 with the explorers to 58% among the innovators. So that practice is also very highly linked to cloud native maturity. And then CI/CD adoption reaches 91% among the most mature organizations. These are fundamental practices for organizational performance, strongly linking to revenues, and factor into the cloud native journey, from going from explorer to innovator is really defined by these practices, GitOps practices, CI/CD, and so on. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn it over now to Jan-Erik Aase. Jan-Erik.
Thanks, Hilary. It's great to be with you. In case people don't know, I don't expect many of you to know me, but ISG, the company that I work for, we are an advisory research and governance company. On the advisory side, we advise over 20 billion in TCV deals per year, making us the largest in that outsourcing space. But it's my privilege to be able to represent the research part of it. And we were able to participate, some of our clients, in this study, and hope to do more in the future. And many of our clients are more and more involved in everything that we're going to talk about. So it's exciting for me to be able to give a little bit of a perspective from an analyst side of it. So Hilary, let's go to the first slide. So we're not surprised by 66%. We're actually surprised it's not larger. In fact, I think if we ran the survey today, it would have jumped up, 10% already. That number will absolutely grow. More and more of the community and the market understand that Kubernetes is critical for elastic scaling, predictive performance, cost control, security, and governance. So the more and more people understand that and see the value, then that number is going to jump up. What we say to our clients is think of AI as just another workload that's going to be operationalized on top of Kubernetes. So that's the way that we ask them to think about it. Let's go to the next slide. So AI hosting, 1/3 don't use Gen AI for inference. We believe we're in a transitional moment where experimentation, full production use, and even avoidance can coexist. That's not going to happen for very long, but that's what's happening right now. You see such a dichotomy of the different clients that we talk to and their adoption or even knowledge of Kubernetes, of cloud native, anything that we're talking about. So enterprises are actually asking which platform can we trust to run this everywhere? As Hilary mentioned, some of the companies that are slow to adopt are those large companies. So they're asking, what can we trust? Where are we going to go to? They've realized that they can't have any more siloed AI architectures or separate ML platforms or bespoke inference stacks or isolating their AI teams. There's really a need for a unified AI strategy, and Kubernetes can be that connective tissue as the control plane for AI. Let's go on to the next slide. So types of workloads, why such a low adoption? 44% seems like a shocking number, but actually we believe that it shows selective and intentional adoption, not rejection. So those numbers are going to shift as we continue to do this survey. So it shouldn't be viewed as this is not working. It should be viewed as people are still figuring it out, but absolutely very active in that area. Going on to the next slide. So the frequency, we shouldn't interpret this as a resistance to Gen AI. It shows the challenge of scaling. We believe this confirms that the work is stuck in pilots. Many pilots out there as we're talking to our clients. But now they're ready to move from proof of concept to repeatable production grade deployments. ISG actually ran a study of generative AI markets. And what we've learned from that study is enterprises aren't lacking ambition or don't have low confidence in AI's potential. They just don't have production grade operating models in place yet. So they're being a little bit cautious. There's all sorts of experimentation happening. There's all sorts of pilots, but to actually move it into full production, they need to invest. They need to take some time. So both want to win. That impact of cost, they want to see projects that impact cost, revenue, or competitive positioning. Many of them want to be fast followers. That's not a surprise. So that's our survey confirmed that it's not that they lack the ambition or they don't trust it. They just want to wait and see what happens, or they want to have a big win so that they can justify the investment for the infrastructure. Going on to the next slide. So cloud native adoption, it has greatly matured. Experimental to standard is really what's happening as we look at the market. Kubernetes has become that infrastructure. Bottlenecking isn't technology, it's change management, as Hilary pointed out in one of her slides. We believe in 2026 will be that inflection point for cloud native adoption as it evolves from a technology choice to an operating model, which can improve our security, our reliability, our compliance, our cost efficiencies. There's so many benefits. So that adoption number will continue to grow as people recognize what the potential is in those areas. Going on to the next page. So container usage. It's moved from a selective use to enterprise-wide production standardization. our clients and I think the clients in this survey are realizing what the benefits are for containers. Faster release cycles, that's one of the first things I think everyone started to see. Fewer deployment failures, very important. Better utilization of our resources. And finally, a solid foundation for both hybrid and multi-cloud strategies. It's moving from being a technical choice and becoming a strategic enabler of enterprise agility and resilience. Next page. So Kubernetes usage. The rise of Kubernetes is a consequence, not a coincidence. On the previous slide, we talked about all the benefits. Containers solve packaging problems, not operational ones. Running a few is easy, but when we scale up to hundreds or even thousands of containers, it's not so easy. Scale and complexity are increased, and Kubernetes becomes that orchestration layer that allow containers to become operational leverage. So more and more people are recognizing that you could handle it when you were just running a few, but in order to run hundreds and thousands, there needs to be more scale and oversight. Going on to the next slide. So what are some of the challenges of using it? So the early challenges, as Hilary pointed out, were technical. They were security, they were complexity, they were monitoring. Now we see big cultural changes. People actually have to change how they've been used to doing their work, and that's not easy. They need to be trained. We've talked about CI/CD already. That's a mentality shift. That is a change in the basic DNA of the programmers, the architects, but that's happening. So the early challenges of security and complexity have been replaced by those cultural changes, and that's not new. Kubernetes and containers face those same issues with the traditional operation models when they began to scale. Cloud native systems require ownership of services end to end, and that are automated by default and designed for potential failures. That hasn't started to happen. So we're seeing when distributed systems meet centralized responsibility, agility begins to be threatened. Not because the platform fails, but because organizations can't adapt to those changes. Going on to the next slide. So GitOps principles. Zero's not, what's the word? Sorry, it's not surprising because there's a lot involved in getting a GitOps up and running. These percentages really capture operating maturity, not a technology preference. Early cloud native adopters rarely use GitOps because their scale allowed for a manual process for people and processes to run that. But once they started to increase, then that's when GitOps needed to be pulled in. So the adoption curve shows that GitOps becomes relevant only once complexity crosses the threshold where human coordination can no longer keep pace with the volumes and the frequencies of change. So that curve that you can see in these numbers makes a lot of sense. People just getting their toes wet, just experimenting, aren't going to put the effort into putting the GitOps in place. But once it scales, then it's not even a choice. It's mandatory to be able to have that in place. And that's what makes a big difference. And then next slide. So CI/CD tools, we view that as the gateway to cloud native maturity. It's the most fundamental practice in the cloud native toolkit. So if GitOps is how mature organizations regain control at scale, we believe that CI/CD is where the journey begins. CI/CD isn't a maturity differentiator, it is a prerequisite. It's also becoming an organization's primary change system for security, policy, testing, and compliance. And so these numbers shouldn't be a surprise either. It's really how cloud native architecture becomes business velocity. It is a controlled, repeatable path from code to production. So in summary, We thought this was a fantastic survey. We've had an opportunity to speak to a number of our clients, and it really represents what they're seeing. And so we're going to encourage more and more clients to participate in the survey. I commend Linux Foundation and CNCF for running this so long and having that rich history of how the market has changed and how it will continue to change. Thanks, Hilary. Over to Jeffrey.
Thanks, Jan-Erik. Jeffrey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Sica, but as it's been alluded to, everyone knows me as Jeffrey in the community. I'm head of projects at the CNCF, but I've also been a community member and a project maintainer for many years. So I have kind of a unique position in all of this. Next slide, please. So it's really awesome from the side of the fence to try, help out architecting this survey, because again, like, I'm looking at things from the foundation perspective and also from the community and project perspective. And we can kind of see the benefits of this survey in projects year over year when it's coming to identifying the gaps and actually informing projects things that will benefit their end users. A good example is, I want to say earlier, we saw that in 2023, there were, or 2024, I'm sorry. Wait, 2023. There were gaps in security and implementation issues. And in the following year, the research shows that there are completely different problems that end users are seeing. And we can kind of infer that's because the projects themselves, and I can attest to it, were really trying to fix things like security issues that end users were having. Next slide, please. So in my opinion, based on this survey, what am I seeing within the community? I think none of this is going to surprise anyone, but AI and Kubernetes are kind of a match made in heaven. The way that Kubernetes started, it had to do with scaling large workloads out. AI is a large workload. There are some unique challenges to it, but it seems like the best foundational platform for it to move forward. Speaking of platform engineering is going to continue to grow. It's the best way to accelerate developers onto whatever kind of workspace they're trying to make a product for. So platform engineering, there's a lot of effort going into it, but also platform engineering is a fantastic way to try and enable certain AI tooling to assist those engineers. I even know of, like, Backstage is building an MCP server. And isn't it fascinating that Backstage, an abstraction layer for engineers to get resources and onboard onto projects, is building an MCP server that could potentially help them and help AI agents moving forward. More than anything, the biggest differentiator in our ecosystem is our culture. We default to open for everything, and we try to make sure that everything is as collaborative as possible, which feeds into my final point. Open source sustainability. It's one of the biggest concerns, both in the foundation and in projects, but also it's one of the things that I think is really getting highlighted and getting helped with in the community. We're seeing more and more people trying to help contribute, and it's really kind of heartening to see that. Next slide. We are at the Q&A portion, which is my favorite. I hate just being a talking head. I love interacting with folks. I saw a few questions lined up, so I'm going to go top to bottom. The first one: since renting AI infra like GPU on public clouds is quite expensive, are companies looking at owning private cloud solutions like OpenStack? If not, why do you think that's the case? Thanks a lot. And I think that was a question off YouTube. I have my take on it. My take is, even though AI infra is expensive and GPUs are hard to get, it's there's so much other overhead cost than just trying to spin up an OpenStack cluster with a couple 3090s that you got at Micro Center. Like it is actually beneficial for you these days to pay for the AI infra than it is at a certain scale, obviously, than it is for you to try and roll your own infra. Mainly because like the other benefits that you get from AI infra, you're not paying for the overhead, and you're also going to get models faster depending on the provider that you get. Jan, I'm not sure if you have a hot take on this.
I loved your reference to roll your own infra. Can we use that, or have you trademarked that already? What we're finding is many clients don't realize what their capacity requirements are, and so they're over engineering. And when they are given tools to be able to track it, they're shocked. So that's one thing that we're saying to our clients is be aware of what you need. I agree with you. It's better to have it and not use it than to need it and not be able to get the capacity that you need. But don't go in it blind. Have a tool in place so you can measure it. So you're not shocked. You don't want price sticker shock when you didn't need to have it. It's just that you didn't manage it appropriately.
Yeah, and the one thing that I'll add to kind of reinforce that, this is not a new problem. If we were having this conversation 10 years ago, the same thing would just be about cloud, not AI. So you look at how we solved that problem 5 years ago, it was called metrics and monitoring to kind of watch all of your usage.
Right.
Second question, and I also think this was from YouTube. The survey says culture is now a bigger blocker than tech. For those of you in the field every day, what does that actually look like inside organizations? I would love to hear kind of opinions in chat, because I certainly have my own opinions, but Jan, do you have an opinion? I kind of don't want to just steal the show.
Yeah, I think that part of the problem is that you need to be organized. You need to have policies in place. You need to have investments. And when you were just dabbling in it, you didn't need it. Now that it becomes production scalable, then you have to have everyone's buy-in. And that's, I think, what the challenge is that companies need to have a stated strategy. Everyone needs to get on board with that strategy, and they need to operate showing that they are on board. That's the point of the cycle that we're in right now for most clients.
Hilary, do you have a hot take?
Yeah, I'll add one thing. I remember last year in Denver, we were talking about the cultural shift to adopting generative AI in software development as a thing. And that was a cultural change. And a lot of developers pushed back against that practice. And so that is just one example of how hard change management is in an organization, let alone on things like security best practices or GitOps practices, CI/CD. It's the hardest thing to get right because it's very people centric, and it also requires some really good tooling. So these types of things take a lot of resources. They take a lot of leadership, and culture begins from the top of an organization.
Well, and we have to be aware that people are still asking, what does this mean for me? What's my future? If I adopt all of this, have I just worked myself out of a job? Have I taken the piece of my job that I love away because now an AI agent is going to do it for me? We can't be naive to the human aspect of all of this. And I think if we continue to just ignore it, change management's going to be even bigger. If we face it or deal with it head on and say, here's what's going to happen, here's what's going to change for you, here are new roles that we are looking for, then I think that change management becomes less of an issue. What we're hearing from our survey respondents is that's not happening in their organization. So change management is still the big issue.
Yeah. Last little thing that I'll add. Culture is really difficult, especially when change outside, just like the velocity of this ecosystem was already fast. Again, 5-6 years ago, people were, complaining that Kubernetes moves super fast. Now we're talking about cloud native plus AI. I was on a trip this past weekend, and an open source project hockey sticked, went through 3 different name changes, and like now everyone is talking about OpenClaw. I was gone for a weekend. Like from a culture perspective, as an engineer at a company, it's incredibly difficult to know where to focus and to try and even get ahead of certain trends when, you know, the company has a stated, you know, culture and a stated, you know, plan, and you're seeing everything move elsewhere. That was kind of my little anecdote. All right, question 4 from YouTube. Can you give details about, or did I skip one? No, I did skip one. I'm sorry. Question 3 from YouTube. Do you think top 3 challenges for Kubernetes in 2023 is AI adoption? Hold on, let me try and figure this one out. Do you think the top 3 challenges for Kubernetes in 2026 is the same as the AI adoption challenges for 2026, which is security, complexity, and monitoring? Hilary, would love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, security is a focus of renewed interest as we're looking at accelerated AI adoption, and the reintroduction of security vulnerabilities that was alluded to is one of those challenges. So yeah, I'm not surprised that would be a top issue again in 2026. We're certainly doing a dedicated study with the Open Source Security Foundation on looking at cybersecurity challenges, security challenges in AI and open source software development from AI. Yeah, so that's my hot take, is it needs further explanation, but the hypothesis is that yes, and yes.
Yeah, Jan, your thoughts?
It's not mentioned, but I think in complexity and in monitoring, we have sovereignty. We hear more and more clients and provider side concerned about how are they going to prove that they are aware of the sovereignty laws and they're ahead of the game. I think that that's something that is coming up more and more with our clients, coming up more and more with providers, of being able to prove. One of our most successful studies for last year was based on data sovereignty.
Sounds good. Question 4, I'm going to admit, is not particularly cloud native specific, so I apologize. I'm going to skip it. I do have opinions. If you want my opinions, feel free to reach out to me outside of this webinar. Last question before we end at a quarter till, also from YouTube. How reliable are your absolute values, such as X% of organizations use Kubernetes? I would expect that you mostly asked CNCF members, which would make it quite unreliable for absolute statements. No? Hilary?
I'll take that one. Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think there's a perception that because the Linux Foundation and CNCF partner on a study, that we would have a disproportionate number of favorable responses. But I must say, when we field this study and when we conduct studies where we buy third-party responses from a panel provider that is not within our community, the response sentiment is actually near identical. So we have a high degree of confidence that the values are reflective of the global technology ecosystem and not unduly skewed toward CNCF friendly folks. There are people in our communities who subscribe to our mailing list who are not necessarily fans. So we're open to all perspectives, whether or not you think that we're doing great work or not. We welcome those voices to come and set the record straight. So the confidence is very high.
I can also add in that we did a comparison of surveys that we've done within ISG's community compared to this, and they're very similar. So, and there's definitely no connection. Certainly, many of our clients are CNCF clients, Linux clients. They're involved in cloud native, but equal numbers. I think I agree with you, Hilary. using a third-party panel provider and finding that those responses are similar to those of your known community proves that we've got an honest feedback and some data we can rely on.
Thanks for that perspective, Jan-Erik.
All right. I think we are out of time. Thank you for the questions. I saw a couple more questions coming after chat. We unfortunately don't have time, but like reach out on socials. I'm sure all of our socials will be posted because some of those questions were really, really good. Thank you, panel. This was awesome. And I think that's it. Am I right, Eliza? I think that's it.
Just thanks from me to everybody who supported the research and who joined today. Looking forward to connecting with you at our community events and appreciate all of your research contributions to date. It's been a pleasure and an honor for me to be on the panel.
And same for me. Thank you for the opportunity. What a great survey. Lots of great data. Excited to get more feedback as we post it out on the different social media channels. Please give us feedback about other questions we can ask or other things that we can consider for future surveys. I think the community always has great feedback that we can leverage year over year.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone for watching and for sending in your questions. They've been fantastic. This will be shared on LinkedIn. This will stay on YouTube on demand, so you can watch it anytime. And there will be an article featuring some of the information from this panel too, coming up on our blog very soon. So as Jeffrey said, reach out on socials, and we can't wait to see you at the next Cloud Native Live.